I still remember the scent of summer grass in the backyard where Willow and I first promised to marry each other at 10 years old, barefoot, sun-kissed, with scraped knees and glowing hearts, swearing that no matter what happened in life, we would grow old together. Two kids too naive to know how cruel time and love can be. Growing up, she was my anchor and my storm, my best friend and the reason I smiled through the darkest nights. And yet, somewhere along the road, the girl who used to run to me with joy in her eyes began to walk away without looking back, slowly replacing her laughter with cold silences, her warmth with bitter sarcasm, and her loyalty with fleeting glances at other men who weren't me. I thought it was a phase, something life would wash away if I just held on tighter, if I just loved her harder, if I just proved again and again that I would never leave her, even when she made me feel invisible in crowds, even when her phone lit up with names she never explained, even when I caught her lying about where she was or who she was with. The truth haunted me, gnawed at my chest like rot under polished wood. But I refused to believe the girl who once held my hand through my mother's funeral could be the same woman who now hid her texts and blamed me for being insecure. I planned our proposal for months, hiding the ring in my closet like a treasure I was too nervous to unveil. But she saw it one day by accident, or maybe she was snooping, and her eyes didn't light up with surprise or joy. They narrowed with something close to panic. Like she wasn't ready, like she never wanted me to ask in the first place. And yet she said yes when I did ask, on one knee under the stars at the lake where we carved our initials into the wooden dock a decade ago. But it was a hollow yes, one wrapped in hesitation, one whispered instead of shouted, and deep down I knew she didn't mean it. But I was too in love, too desperate, too afraid to lose the only person I'd ever truly trusted. The engagement period was a mess. She picked fights over everything, disappeared for nights without telling me where she was, and every time I confronted her, she flipped it back on me, said I was suffocating her, that I was trying to trap her in a life she didn't ask for, and then cried in my arms like I was the only one who understood her pain. I didn't see it then, but now I know. Those tears weren't for me. They were for herself, for the guilt she didn't want to face, for the man she was seeing behind my back. His name was Ethan. I heard it the first time from her cousin at a family gathering. Just a whisper, a warning. She's always with that Ethan guy lately, huh? And my stomach dropped like ice water poured down my spine. I didn't confront her that night. I watched her instead. Watched her smile at her phone with a softness she hadn't shown me in months, and it was like dying in slow motion. I tried to ignore it, tried to be patient, thinking maybe she was going through something, that it was just confusion, that she'd come back to me when she remembered who we were. But the truth kept unfolding like a sick joke. Photos on her private Instagram, tagged locations at fancy places I couldn't afford, receipts in her bag from restaurants she swore she never went to, and perfume I'd never smelled on her skin before. I confronted her finally one night, trembling, broken, voice cracking as I asked, "Are you seeing someone else?" And instead of denying it, she just looked at me like I was pathetic, like I was a child who didn't understand how the world worked, and said, "It's not that simple, George. You wouldn't understand. Ethan makes me feel alive." Alive. That one word shattered me. What was I then? A walking corpse, a placeholder, a pit stop until someone richer, smoother, more exciting came along? She still wanted the wedding, she said, still wanted to marry me eventually. Just not now, not yet. As if love was a decision you could postpone like a dentist appointment. And all I could do was sit there, holding her hand that still wore the ring I gave her, pretending we were still us. But the final blow came a week before the wedding. Everything was ready. Venue booked, flowers paid for, suits tailored, guests invited. I was standing in our apartment holding my vows, written with bleeding ink and sleepless nights when she came home and said it. "I can't do this. I need more time. I'm going away with Ethan for a while, but don't worry, George, I'll come back. I always do." And then she left. Just like that. A decade of love tossed aside like trash, like I was a backup plan she might return to if the shiny new thing got boring. That night, I sat alone in our half-packed apartment, staring at the fridge magnet we got from our first vacation together, wondering how a girl who once kissed my scraped knees could be the same woman who crushed my soul without blinking. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, a hollow man surrounded by memories that mocked me. And finally, after what felt like hours of silence, I whispered to myself the one truth I never wanted to believe. She never really loved me, not the way I loved her. And maybe, just maybe, that was my fault too. After Willow left, something inside me didn't just break. It collapsed entirely, like a building imploding from years of hidden cracks and neglected damage. And in the days that followed, I became a ghost in my own skin, moving through the world in slow, disjointed motions, barely eating, barely speaking, staring blankly at the wedding invitations that still sat in a neat pile on my kitchen counter like mocking reminders of what almost was. I tried to erase her from the apartment, tossed out her clothes, boxed up her things, deleted our photos, but every corner of that place whispered her name. Every creak in the floorboards sounded like her footsteps, and at night I would reach out in bed only to grasp cold sheets where she used to lay, curled against me like I was her safe haven. It would have been so easy to sink completely, to drown in whiskey and self-pity, to call her late at night and beg her to come back like a fool chasing the very blade that cut him open. But something in me snapped, not in a violent way, but in a quiet, powerful shift, like the tightening of a fist after too long lying open and vulnerable. I looked at myself in the mirror one morning, unkempt hair, sunken eyes, jaw clenched, and I said out loud, "No more." That was the day I started becoming someone new, not for her, not to make her regret, but because I couldn't live like a ghost anymore. I started small, morning runs to clear my head, simple meals to regain my strength, journaling every thought that clawed at my insides so I wouldn't explode from holding it all in. I blocked Willow's number, muted her on every platform, deleted every message, even the ones I used to reread like scripture. And though it felt like amputating a part of myself, I knew it was the only way to heal. I poured myself into work, staying late, picking up side gigs, investing in skills I never had time to build before, because my world revolved around someone who only saw me as a placeholder. I took a digital marketing course at night, signed up for online business seminars, and read every book I could get my hands on about entrepreneurship, mindset, growth, anything to drown out the echo of her name. And slowly, painfully, I started to rise. Within 6 months, I had launched my own freelancing business, started earning more than I ever did at my 9 to 5, and moved into a new apartment across town that had no shadows of her lingering in the corners. My body changed too. I hit the gym relentlessly, not out of vanity, but because every drop of sweat felt like burning away another lie she told me. Another night, I stayed up wondering where she was. I started to look alive again. Friends noticed. My sister cried the first time she saw me smile and actually mean it. And yet, in the quiet moments when the world slowed down and the noise faded, the pain would creep back in. Not because I missed her, but because I mourned the version of myself that waited so long for someone who never truly chose me. But even that grief became fuel. And then, one day, I saw her again. It was at the coffee shop by my old apartment, pure chance or maybe fate being cruel again. And she walked in hand with Ethan, wearing oversized sunglasses and that fake little laugh she used to reserve for strangers she wanted to impress. But something about her looked different. Thinner, paler, distracted, like the shine had worn off and reality had come knocking. She didn't see me at first, but when she did, her eyes widened slightly and she froze mid-step, her hand slipping from Ethan's like it was never supposed to be there. I didn't say anything. I just met her gaze for a beat, nodded once, calm and unreadable, and turned back to my laptop without a word. The look on her face was priceless, part confusion, part longing, regret. I couldn't tell, and honestly, I didn't care. I finished my coffee, packed my things, and left without looking back, heart pounding not from pain, but from pride. I had survived her. A few days later, she texted me from a new number. "Hey, can we talk? Just as friends." I stared at the message for a long time before deleting it without replying. There was nothing left to say to someone who threw me away for a man who could afford fancy dinners and whispered sweet lies. But curiosity is a tricky thing, and over time I began to hear whispers, mutual friends mentioning that things weren't as perfect as Willow had painted them. Apparently, Ethan was controlling, dismissive, emotionally distant, even cruel behind closed doors. She'd show up at gatherings without him, claiming he was busy, and her Instagram feed went from champagne glasses and sunset yachts to throwbacks and selfies with cryptic captions like, "Not everything that glitters is gold." But that wasn't my problem anymore. She made her choice. And while she was living in the echo chamber of a fantasy turned nightmare, I was climbing. My business took off like wildfire. Clients started pouring in. I was invited to speak on panels, interviewed for podcasts, and even featured in an online magazine as a young entrepreneur to watch. The recognition didn't heal the wound, but it made the scar something I could wear with pride. And just when I thought I had no room left for love, Sophia walked into my life. Not like a wrecking ball, not like a storm, but like sunlight breaking through a window I forgot I left open. She was nothing like Willow. Soft but strong, curious without being invasive, kind without the need to be praised for it. We met at a business conference, both of us lost in the crowd, and she made a joke about the stale coffee that actually made me laugh for the first time in weeks. She didn't know my story, and I didn't tell it. Not right away. With Sophia, there was no performance, no mask. She saw me, not the broken man I used to be or the rising success I was becoming, but just me, and that was enough. We took things slow, shared stories over late night phone calls, talked about dreams instead of dramas, and when she finally asked about Willow, I didn't flinch. I told her the truth, ugly, raw, real, and she didn't pity me or get angry on my behalf. She just held my hand and said, "Thank you for surviving her." That was the moment I realized healing isn't always a straight line. Sometimes it circles back, sometimes it burns, but it also rebuilds. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing someone. I was walking beside someone who chose me without hesitation. Sophia didn't complete me. She reminded me I was already whole. I wasn't prepared for how fast the tables would turn. One moment I was a discarded chapter in Willow's story. The next I became the headline she couldn't ignore. And it wasn't because I changed to make her jealous. It was because, for once, I chose myself. The whispers turned to full-blown conversations. People talking about how Ethan was never the prince he pretended to be. I heard from mutual friends how he belittled Willow in public, called her names behind her back, flirted with waitresses when she wasn't looking, and dismissed her opinions like she was nothing but arm candy. At first, she defended him. Of course she did. Pride is a hell of a drug. But cracks started showing fast. I remember one night, just after Sophia and I had returned from a weekend retreat in the countryside, I opened my inbox and found a message from Willow. The subject line read, "I miss us." That was all. No greeting, no apology, no explanation. Just that. Three pathetic words sent in the middle of the night, like a drunk confession to a love she didn't deserve. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Her regrets were not my responsibility anymore. But the messages kept coming. Texts, emails, even a handwritten letter sent to my new apartment, as if pouring ink onto paper could erase the months she spent tangled in another man's sheets. I didn't reply. Silence was my armor. I'd given her every word I had, every apology, every second chance, and when I needed even a fraction of that grace, she handed it to Ethan without hesitation. But as her world cracked apart, mine was just beginning to bloom. Sophia and I had grown closer, our laughs genuine, our plans real. She didn't love me for what I could give her, but for who I was in the quiet, in the messy, in the moments when I still second-guessed myself. She saw the scars and didn't flinch. She loved me for them, and the more she stayed, the more Willow seemed to unravel. One day, out of nowhere, I saw Willow waiting outside my office building. Her hair was a mess, her makeup smudged, not from drama, but from exhaustion, stress, maybe even tears. She looked nothing like the polished girl who once stood beside Ethan in designer dresses and designer lies. I walked past her without a word, but she stepped in front of me, her voice low and shaky. "George, please just give me 5 minutes." I wanted to laugh. 5 minutes? She had 10 years and threw them away like garbage. But I looked at her, really looked, and what I saw wasn't a villain anymore. It was a girl who destroyed everything good in her life and realized far too late that not all men wait forever. Against my better judgment, I nodded once and walked her to a nearby bench, sitting down like two strangers sharing old ghosts. She started with excuses. I was confused. I didn't know what I wanted. Ethan promised me so much, but I didn't say anything. I just let her talk. She admitted everything: how Ethan cheated, how he controlled her money, isolated her from her friends, made her feel small, disposable, and worst of all, how he made her realize what real love was, only after she'd already lost it. "It was you, George," she said through trembling lips. "It was always you. I just didn't see it until I couldn't reach you anymore." And that's when it hit me. I wasn't angry. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want her back. I felt nothing. Just the hollow weight of a history that used to mean everything but now held no power over me. I stood up, looked her in the eye, and said the one sentence she never expected to hear: "I forgive you, but I don't need you anymore." Her face crumpled like paper soaked in rain, but I didn't stay to watch her fall apart. I walked away. Not out of cruelty, but because healing means walking away even when it hurts, even when the past begs you to stay and fix what should have never been broken in the first place. Later that night, I told Sophia everything, not because I owed her that truth, but because I wanted her to know how far I'd come. She listened quietly, nodded, and instead of jealousy or insecurity, she simply kissed my hand and said, "That chapter is closed, and I'm glad I get to be the one helping you write the next one." I stared at her in awe, wondering how fate could be so cruel in one breath and so generous in another. But that's life, isn't it? It tears you down so you can learn how to rebuild stronger. Willow kept trying after that, showing up at events she knew I'd be at, trying to talk to my friends, even commenting under Sophia's post with fake sweetness, but I never responded. My silence was louder than any words I could have said. She had her chance. She had every version of me, before the pain, during the pain, even after it. But she chose Ethan. And now that the lights were off, the music faded, and the crowd gone, she wanted to come home. But I wasn't her home anymore. I was the locked door at the end of a road she burned. And Sophia? She was the sunrise on the other side of that door. The life I was always meant to build once I let go of everything that weighed me down. I still saw Willow sometimes, across streets, in shops, at random events, and every time she looked smaller, quieter, sadder. Regret ages people, guilt breaks them. But me? I stood taller, laughed louder, lived freer, because I had survived the kind of love that kills you slowly, and I came out the other side not bitter, but better. And that was the sweetest revenge of all. Life, when it finally began to feel like mine again, was a kind of peace I never knew I deserved. A warmth I used to search for in Willow's eyes, but now found every time I woke up beside Sophia, whose quiet breathing and gentle smile made even the darkest memories lose their power over me. And yet, while my world blossomed, Willow's world began to rot beneath her feet. I didn't chase the updates. People brought them to me like they couldn't resist the drama, the irony, the justice of it all. And though I never asked, the stories found me anyway. Ethan had grown colder, crueler, more distant with every month, and the man Willow left me for had turned into a stranger who drained her accounts, humiliated her in public, flirted with her friends, and reminded her daily that she was lucky to be with someone like him. I heard he cheated, blatantly, unapologetically, and when she confronted him, he laughed in her face, told her she wasn't worth the trouble of hiding it, and that was the beginning of her downfall. She moved out, back into a cheap apartment miles away from the fancy life she'd posted so proudly, and tried to pick up the shattered pieces of her pride. But pride is fragile when it's built on betrayal. Her social media turned dark. No more glowing captions, no more champagne glasses or couple photos, just black screens, vague quotes, and desperate attempts to cling to a version of herself that no longer existed. And still, she reached out. Sometimes I'd get an email at 2 a.m. "I miss your hugs," or a message on a burner account. "I still dream about our wedding day." Sophia saw them sometimes. She'd raise an eyebrow, glance at me, but never once accused or questioned. That's the thing about being loved right. You stop feeling like you have to prove your loyalty every second, because the person beside you sees who you are without needing reassurances. We were building something real. Slow mornings with shared coffee, nights brainstorming our business ideas, weekends spent hiking, laughing, falling more in love without the need for theatrics or grand apologies. Sophia encouraged me to open my own firm, to expand beyond freelancing, and together we built a brand that didn't just succeed, it thrived. Clients came in droves, people respected my name, and for the first time I became someone whose presence didn't just fill a room, it changed the energy in it. Meanwhile, Willow lost job after job, fired for lateness, emotional outbursts, unreliability. A friend told me she had started therapy, and I hope that was true. Not out of pity, but because healing is hard. And even she, after all the chaos she caused, deserved a chance to find peace within herself. But healing only works when you stop blaming others. And Willow, she never learned how to take full responsibility. She'd post stories blaming Ethan, blaming fake friends, blaming bad luck, but never once admitted that she destroyed the man who would have worshipped the ground she walked on if she had just loved him back with half the loyalty he gave her. One day I ran into her at the supermarket. She was standing in the frozen food aisle, hair tied back, hoodie too big, no makeup, just raw, plain, exhausted. I almost didn't recognize her. She turned, saw me, and froze. "George," she whispered, like my name was both a curse and a prayer. "Hey," I said calmly, not cold, not cruel, just indifferent. "You look good," she said after a long pause, eyes searching mine like maybe she could still find a version of me who'd give her one more chance. But he was dead. Buried under the nights I cried for her, under the dreams she ripped apart for Ethan's money, under the silence she left me with when I needed her most. "Thanks," I replied, and that was it. I didn't ask how she was. I didn't invite her to catch up. I grabbed my groceries and walked away. And as I glanced back for a second, I saw her standing there, completely still, her shoulders shaking as she quietly cried in the middle of a fluorescent lit aisle, and I felt nothing. Nothing. Not joy. Not revenge. Just peace. That's when I knew I had finally healed. Sophia and I kept growing. Our business crossed 6 figures. We bought a house on the edge of the city with a garden she filled with sunflowers and herbs, and every night I'd lie next to her thinking, this is what love feels like. Not fireworks, not chaos, just a steady fire that never goes out. My family adored her. My mother cried the first time Sophia brought her flowers without a reason, and my sister once told me in private, "You finally found someone who sees you like we always did." We got engaged quietly, no grand announcement, just the two of us on a mountain trail at sunset, and when I slipped the ring on her finger, she whispered, "You're the reason I believe in good men." And yet, even in that perfect happiness, Willow lingered, like smoke from an old fire, distant but never fully gone. She showed up to our engagement dinner, uninvited, standing across the street in a raincoat like a shadow of what she used to be. Our eyes met, and I shook my head slightly, not in anger, but in finality. And she nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks, finally understanding that she wasn't part of this chapter. She was the lesson, the warning, the storm before the calm. And as she turned and walked away for the last time, I held Sophia's hand tighter, grateful that I had been broken. Because if I hadn't, I never would have known how whole I could become. Willow had spent years taking pieces of me, and for so long I thought I'd never get them back. But piece by piece, Sophia gave them to me, not by fixing me, but by showing me that I was never truly broken, just lost in someone else's storm. And now I stood on solid ground, looking at the wreckage of my past with eyes wide open, heart finally free, and future blazing bright, because I had chosen love, real love, and she had chosen regret, and that was the difference between us. The day I married Sophia was quiet, golden, and honest. Nothing like the over-the-top wedding I once planned with Willow. Nothing like the hollow fantasy filled with guests I barely knew and expectations I didn't believe in. This was different. This was real. The ceremony took place in a secluded garden surrounded by wildflowers and trees that had stood through storms, just like us. I wore a simple black suit. She wore a white dress that floated like a whisper, and as she walked toward me, eyes locked with mine, I realized this was what I had always waited for. Not a promise whispered through tears, not a love tested by betrayal, but a love that endured without needing to be proven. The guests were close friends, family who watched me break and rebuild, and in the front row sat my mother, tears in her eyes, hands clasped as if in prayer, and my father, proud and silent, nodding like he finally understood why I had to walk away from the life I once thought was enough. And somewhere beyond the trees, standing far away from the crowd, was Willow. I saw her. Of course I did. Dressed in a faded blue dress, hair pulled back neatly, she was hiding behind the distance like a ghost who hadn't yet realized she was no longer part of the living. She wasn't invited, she wasn't welcome, but part of me knew she'd come, not to interrupt, not to beg, but to see, to feel the full weight of what she'd thrown away. And so I let her stay. I didn't send anyone to move her. I didn't flinch, because that moment was no longer about her. It was about me finally choosing someone who chose me back without hesitation. When Sophia said her vows, her voice didn't shake. She spoke of our late night talks, the quiet healing, the dreams we built from scratch, and how she fell in love not with the version of me that had it all together, but with the man who stood up after being shattered. And when it was my turn, I took her hands, looked into the eyes that never once lied to me, and said, "Thank you for loving the man I became after I stopped begging to be loved by someone who never really saw me." Behind the trees, I saw Willow turn away. She couldn't bear it, and I didn't blame her. That moment wasn't punishment. It was clarity, a mirror held up to her decisions, and there's no pain sharper than watching someone else live the life you once held in your hands and dropped. After the ceremony, we danced slowly under the stars. The music was soft, our breaths sinking like we were made to move this way forever. Sophia's head rested on my chest, her fingers gripping mine like she never wanted to let go. I whispered, "We made it." And she smiled without opening her eyes, because we both knew how much blood, silence, and heartbreak it took to arrive at this peace. Meanwhile, Willow disappeared into the night. Some guests mentioned they saw her crying behind her car. Others said she drove off before the cake was even cut. I didn't ask. I didn't care. Her story ended long before this chapter began, and the only person left in that story was her. Weeks later, I received one final message. No name, no long plea, just a single sentence. "I hope she never hurts you the way I did." And that's when I realized the final difference between love and regret. Love builds, regret begs. I didn't reply. There was no need. I was too busy living. Sophia and I honeymooned in Italy, laughed over cheap wine, and shared pizza under ancient stone arches. We danced barefoot on beaches, read each other poetry, and fell asleep tangled in each other like the world couldn't touch us. And when we returned home, we started the next chapter, building a family, growing our business, giving to others, and waking up every day knowing we chose the right people. And yet, even as the years passed, I never forgot the boy I was. The one who loved Willow with his entire soul, who believed promises meant permanence, who gave chances like candy and stayed far too long in a place that only hurt. I remember him, not with shame, but with pride. He was naive, yes, but he had a heart that never gave up. And that's the same heart Sophia now holds, stronger, wiser, scarred, but still beating with purpose. Willow? She moved towns, I heard, tried to start fresh. Some said she dated a few men, but none stayed. Trust, once shattered, becomes a prison. And she had built her own cell. She still posts vague quotes online, pictures of sunsets with captions about healing and the one that got away. And maybe people feel sorry for her, but I don't, because I know better. She didn't lose me because she made a mistake. She lost me because she kept making the same one, thinking I'd always be there to forgive her. But I'm not her shadow anymore. I'm the sunrise she can't reach, the life she could have had, and the lesson she'll never forget. And every night when I lay beside Sophia and feel her warmth, hear her breathing, and know I am loved by someone who never made me beg for it, I thank the pain, because it taught me how to recognize something real when it finally arrived. I used to think heartbreak was the end of everything. Now I know it was just the beginning. And this is the life Willow watched disappear while holding the ashes of what we once were. And I don't look back. Not anymore.